Here's Shep.
It's noon on the West Coast, 3 o'clock at the State Department, where Secretary Tillerson has just spoken after the president fired him. A source tells Fox News Secretary Tillerson got the news from President Trump's Twitter account. An aide says Secretary Tillerson does not know why he's gone. Now that aide is also fired, while President Trump says Tillerson should not have been surprised.
Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things.
Well, the president has now nominated the CIA director to replace Secretary Tillerson and promoting a woman with a controversial past to run the CIA. We'll check out all of those moves, explain how they unfolded, and hear how insiders are reacting. Plus, President Trump checking out some options for his border wall in this hour. We could see it happen live. So let's get to it.
Now, Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
And first from the Fox News deck this Tuesday afternoon, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says he talked to President Trump hours after he got fired.
I received a call today from the President of the United States at a little after noontime from Air Force One. And I've also spoken to White House Chief of Staff Kelly to ensure we have clarity as to the days ahead. What is most important is to ensure an orderly and smooth transition during a time that the country continues to face significant policy and national security challenges.
Secretary Tillerson says he'll hand over all of his responsibilities at the end of the day and officially step down at the end of this month. A source tells Fox News Secretary Tillerson found out that he was out of a job in a presidential tweet. The source says the White House Chief of Staff John Kelly called Secretary Tillerson on Friday, told him to keep an eye on President Trump's Twitter account. Then today, the president tweeted, Mike Pompeo, director of the CIA, will become our new Secretary of State. He will do a fantastic job. Thank you to Rex Tillerson for his service. Gina Haspel will become the new director of the CIA and the first woman so chosen. Congratulations to all. Hours after that tweet, an undersecretary of state said Secretary Tillerson did not know why the president fired him. A senior State Department official tells Fox News the White House later fired the undersecretary too. More on that in just a moment. President Trump told reporters this morning that he's talked to Tillerson about leaving for, quote, a long time. The president also said while they don't agree on some foreign policy issues, they get along quite well.
When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he felt it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same.
And the president said he believes Tillerson will be much happier now. As we saw in the tweet, the president says he's nominating the CIA director Mike Pompeo to be the next Secretary of State, and the deputy CIA director Gina Haspel to be the first woman to head the CIA. Ahead, we'll talk with our national security correspondent about why her nomination is already facing such backlash on Capitol Hill. First Team Fox coverage, Rich Edson with more reaction from the State Department. First to the White House and our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts. What are you hearing about the timeline for President Trump's firing of Tillerson?
Shep, good afternoon to you. We've got a couple of competing narratives here. There's the State Department narrative, which is the one that you articulated a short time ago, that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was blindsided by the news this morning, that he had no idea that the president was going to fire him. But sources at the White House tell me something quite different. They tell me that the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, telephoned Tillerson when he was on his trip to Africa on Friday to say that the president wanted to make a change and that Tillerson would be expected to step down. Tillerson, during that phone call, we're told, asked the Chief of Staff John Kelly if the president could wait until Tillerson got back from the trip before he made the announcement. You don't want to be going to meet with foreign leaders or other dignitaries, the president having just told the world that you're no longer working for the White House. Sources also tell Fox News that the president has been wanting to get Mike Pompeo over to the State Department for an awfully long time. You'll remember back in October, there were a lot of rumblings that Rex Tillerson wouldn't be long for the State Department and that Pompeo would be moving over. The president this afternoon saying he loves the guy. Listen here.
I respect his intellect. I respect the process that we've all gone through together. We have a very good relationship for whatever reason, chemistry, whatever it is. Why do people get along? I've always, right from the beginning, from day one, I've gotten along well with Mike Pompeo. And frankly, I get along well with Rex, too. And, you know, I wish Rex a lot of good things. I think he's going to be very happy.
You know, the president does spend an awful lot of quality time with Mike Pompeo. As the CIA director, he's over here at the White House very frequently, giving the president his daily brief on the greater intelligence briefing. The president loves his pedigree. First in his class at West Point, served in Europe during the Cold War. Then he went to Harvard Law School. He's a businessman, four-term congressman from Kansas. He, you know, checks a lot of boxes there that the president really likes. And here's the reason, Shep, why the timing of all of this now. A lot of it had to do with that announcement last Thursday when the South Koreans came out and said that Kim Jong-un wanted to meet with the president, and then the White House said that the president would meet with him. The president wanted to get a new State Department team in place for what might be a meeting with Kim and then negotiations on Korea's denuclearization. No secret that he has been at odds with Rex Tillerson over some of that. The other aspect of all of this, too, is that there's a lot of trade deals, difficult trade deals and negotiations that the president will be engaged in for the next 9 months. And he wanted to have somebody very strong and on the same page as him at the State Department for all of that. Shep?
John was listening to the president today as he spoke there out on the lawn, and it sounded like what he was saying was, I'm not finished making changes, not just yet.
And he tweeted about that last week. He said something about it in the cabinet room as well. He did say out on the lawn that he's getting close to getting the cabinet that he wants, but the suggestion is there's maybe a couple of other folks. One of the big people that we talk about here potentially leaving the White House is H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor. I mean, there have been a lot of rumblings about that flying around for a long time. I'm told by people close to him that you know, they are trying to get that 4-star for him. And maybe at the point when he gets that 4-star, he may choose to leave the White House. But we don't know yet, and we don't know if this is going to happen within the next month or two. Certainly we're led to believe it's not, but maybe by this time next year we'll have a different national security advisor, or maybe by this time next week, Shep. You just never know.
Yeah, sometimes you check the calendar, sometimes you check your watch. We'll know when we know. Well, now, a separate matter, and the president's personal assistant out with security. Separate matter, but interesting.
Yeah, this one's really puzzling. Is Johnny McEntee. He was the quarterback for the University of Connecticut before he came here to join the White House as the president's, quote, body man. He would literally be at the president's side on just about every trip. He'd be the guy that would bring out the speech and put it on the podium before the president spoke. He suddenly left the White House and was escorted off the property in a great deal of hurry. In fact, he had to get somebody to bring his jacket out to him. And apparently the White House said that they're going to mail him his personal effects. We don't know what is behind this, Shep, and we've checked with a lot of folks. There's some speculation out there that he had some financial problems or was involved in some financial misdealings that precluded him from getting a permanent security pass. We had heard that earlier today, but then I was told that he got his permanent security clearance about 6 weeks ago. So I don't know how it could be related to that, but definitely a mystery, Shep, and we're going to keep shaking the trees to see what falls out.
But going to work for the campaign, is that right, or is that still sort of all
which is another part of this that doesn't add up. After walking out of the White House, apparently he's been hired by the Trump campaign, but if you were under serious investigation for some sort of financial misdealings, as has been suggested, I don't know why the campaign would hire you. So that's why I said it's murky and it's a mystery.
John Roberts on another busy day at the White House. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Shep.
So how's this going over at the State Department? Let's go there. Our correspondent Rich Edson works the State Department for us. Secretary Tillerson spoke, just a short time ago.
He did, Shep, and he's Secretary of State at least for another few more hours. That's when he turns over the reins to Deputy Secretary John Sullivan until the Senate confirms his replacement. The Secretary said in his address here at the State Department that he had spoken to the President around noon today, which was 3 hours after the President had tweeted all of this out publicly. In that talk in the briefing room here, the Secretary said that there are great people here that prefer and are pushing diplomacy over military action first, and they continue to do great work here. And then he officially said his goodbye as Secretary of State.
My commission as Secretary of State will terminate at midnight, March the 31st. Between now and then, I will address a few administrative matters related to my departure and work towards a smooth and orderly transition for Secretary of State designate Mike Pompeo.
Some officials here continue to maintain that the Secretary of State was essentially blindsided this morning, that he might have gotten an idea of it Friday night, but it was not confirmed that he would be out as Secretary of State until after the president tweeted it this morning. That's the contention of some officials here at the State Department. This statement went out shortly thereafter. This is from Undersecretary Steve Goldstein. He said, quote, "The Secretary did not speak to the president this morning," he did this afternoon, "and is unaware of the reason. But he's grateful for the opportunity to serve and still believes strongly that the public service is a noble calling and not to be regretted." Shortly thereafter, the White House fired Undersecretary Steve Goldstein. Secretary Tillerson took no questions to clear this up. He made his statement and he left the podium here. He did tout some of his accomplishments. He talked about the campaign against North Korea to get Kim Jong-un to the negotiating table, a strategy in Afghanistan and South Asia, and he took one more shot at Russia, saying if Russia does not change its course, then it is due for even more isolation in the future, Shep.
On the timeline here, yesterday, the British came forward, including Theresa May, saying, "We believe the Russians may have, murdered this guy with a nerve agent in our country." Secretary Tillerson spoke out against the Russians. The White House, given 3 opportunities to do so, refused to criticize the Russians, and suddenly Rex Tillerson's out. Are those dots to be connected or just to be noticed on a page?
It could be noticed on a page, Shep, but if you're to believe the White House timeline in all this, and the Secretary of State knew on Friday night that he was not going to be Secretary of State anymore, and even the State Department timeline that there should have been some inkling that there was an issue here with his employment, then maybe the Secretary was a little freer in his comments. I'll get to what he said last night. He said, while traveling back from Africa, quote, "We are outraged that Russia appears to have again engaged in such behavior. From Ukraine to Syria and now the UK, Russia continues to be an irresponsible force of instability in the world, acting with open disregard for the sovereignty of other states and the life of their citizens." Also, senior State Department officials were telling us just a couple of days ago that the Secretary of State and the State Department had basically had enough with Russia on many fronts. They still wanted to try to work with the Russians, but they were going to be taking a much more aggressive posture, certainly publicly, towards the Russians. That's something that we had heard from the State Department within this week. And the Secretary of State also knocked on Russia again today. Take a listen.
Much work remains to respond to the troubling behavior and actions on the part of the Russian government. Russia must assess carefully as to how its actions are in the best interest of the Russian people and of the world more broadly.
We are still waiting for the administration to announce and release the sanctions information. That's expected to be coming soon, though that timeline is still now unclear. Shep.
Rich Edson at the State Department, thanks. I said